Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for this combined on-site and online event. We are now live in both Zagreb and LA, and it's my great pleasure to introduce Mr. Peter Ramsey for a conversation that will be moderated by Aubrey Mintz. So, without further ado, we don't want to lose time because we only have you for an hour. Thank you so much for doing this, and I can't wait to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Animafest Zagreb. It's wonderful to be here on behalf of ASIFA-Hollywood, and we are very excited to talk to Director Peter Ramsey today. Peter, I have a few questions just to the audience. We have probably about 10 questions or so, and then I'll open it up to Q&A from the audience as well, so we'll hopefully get as many in as possible.
Great. Hey, everybody. It's great to be here.
Peter, I wanted to ask what it was like to be a young artist growing up in Crenshaw in South LA, and did anyone help start you on your path to your success?
Oh, yeah, great question. I didn't have any real artistic mentors outside of friends and the few teachers that I had in school. I mean, there was very little arts education in Los Angeles public schools back then, and I think the situation's even worse now, sadly enough. But yeah, my real mentors were friends. You know, there were back in those days. You know, this was pre-internet. It was a time when things like the movie industry or the whole, you know, there was no video gaming because there were no video games. There wasn't sort of like the same kind of geek culture that we have now, where so many of these things are gigantic businesses, or where comic books are, you know, kind of respected as, you know, media in their own right. This was back in the days where all that stuff was viewed as junk culture, you know, and I had a few friends that had similar interests, and we bonded that way, and sort of learned together and taught each other. So I don't think I had real artistic mentors outside my very talented friends who I looked up to until I was actually entering the industry.
And now jump forward to 2019. You were executive producer on Hair Love, which won an Oscar for Best Animated Short. You were the first African-American to win an Oscar in Best Animated Feature category for Spider-Man Into the SpiderVerse. The first Black director at DreamWorks on Rise of the Guardians. I think of heroes like Sidney Poitier, who was the first African-American to win Academy Award for Best Actor, Halle Berry to win Best Actress, and 40 years later, 2002. I read a great tweet after Frank Abney, Black animator at Pixar, watched SpiderVerse and said the highlight was when his son said, "I want to be Spider-Man like Miles Morales." He already knew Spider-Man, but now he can identify. So now we have mentors. How does the impact of all these achievements hit you, Peter?
It's so strange. I mean, I always have you know, what they call imposter syndrome, because you know, I'm largely self-taught. I've just kind of stumbled my way through years and years of learning things by trial and error. So I'm always thinking I missed something, or that, you know, if I'd gone to college and you know, taken all the right steps, that there's some magical formula that I'd know that everybody else does. And, you know, I'm old enough now that I realize, well, that's not necessarily the case. But yeah, it's a funny thing for people to look at you as some sort of you know, pioneer or role model or hero, when honestly, I think most people working creatively are just kind of consumed with the idea of getting it right. You know, just making sure that their work is kind of achieving the goals they want it to live up to. You know, it's a careers for anyone. I think there's a lot of luck involved. There's, you know, years and years of preparation with no reward, or it's a lot of times no thought of reward. You're just exploring for the love of it. And that a lot of times that turns into being in the right place at the right time with the right amount of preparation, that you can sort of step into the place where apparently you're meant to be. And over and over in my career, that was kind of the case. And people ask me all the time, what's the number one piece of advice you would give somebody who wants a career in this field? And I say persistence. You know, if you love this, if you love a craft, whatever it is, and you know, you really are passionate about it, you keep on going no matter what, even if you're not getting an immediate tangible reward. And if you just keep going, sooner or later some door is going to open up. You're going to run into something at some point. It just feels almost inevitable to me.
Well, it's wonderful. Well, you ran into several people that you worked with over the last throughout your career, like icons like Spielberg, Ron Howard, John Singleton, Rachel Talalay. The list goes on and on. Is there something you've noticed, like working with such icons, or any words of wisdom that they've imparted to you that you want to impart to others?
Oh God, yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest things I learned, you know, when I started working professionally, after wanting to do it for so long and looking up to so many of these filmmakers, was seeing them in action and seeing how much doubt they go through, seeing how much of their process is trial and error, seeing how many times they fail and sort of have to regroup and try another direction or another just another set of ideas. And it just kind of taught me the value of resilience and of realizing that you don't always have the right answer the first time, and that's fine, you know. And I think part of what makes these people successful is their ability to embrace that, so they don't have a fear of making the wrong decision or failing, because they know that, you know, if you learn from a mistake quickly, you can go another way and try something else. And so, or learn what, you know, sometimes the mistake gives you something good that you can adapt to and work with. So I think it sort of helps people build a sort of intellectual fearlessness to a degree when they realize that a mistake is not the end of the world. You know, it frees you from a kind of paralysis. That's one of the biggest things I learned. I was working with I was lucky enough to work with Francis Coppola on Bram Stoker's Dracula, and it was one of the greatest learning experiences of my life. And you know, I asked Francis one day, because, you know, I was a young guy and I was, you know, trying to write and I wanted to direct, and I said, God, do you ever like have problems with doubt? Do you ever struggle with self-doubt? You know, and you think the guy who made The Godfather and Apocalypse Now and The Conversation, and, you know, it's like he's like a god. You know, he was to me. And he said, every day. He said, all the time. It's a terrible struggle, but you know, it's just something. It's just something you acknowledge and accept, and you have to teach yourself that it's not necessarily reality, and go on. So it was really interesting.
In short, it sounds like these people were human.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's everyone. I mean, I worked with guys like David Fincher, you know, who's like, you think that guy's an infallible android from, you know, the future, and you know, it's the same with David, you know, and but it's that whole thing of having enough belief and confidence in yourself that you're eventually going to get to the right answer, that you can have the wrong answer. You can see it go wrong. Everybody else sees it go wrong. And you just say, all right, now we're going left instead of right, you know, and suddenly it's, you know, you've made another decision, you fixed it, and it's now you're doing the right thing. So it's, it really is a mental attitude that you have to cultivate.
Wonderful. I'm going to shift a little bit to talk about SpiderVerse now. You've made several other films. None have quite resonated with the audience in the same way as SpiderVerse has. What do you think it is about this film that reached so many?
Yeah, I think SpiderVerse had the combination kind of there's a winning combination. If you have something that's familiar and loved, but it's presented in an entirely new way so that it's a surprise, that seems to be something that really really has a huge impact. And so much of what we were trying to do with SpiderVerse was sort of built around the idea of, well, this is a new Spider-Man movie. You know, there had been so many Spider-Man movies that in the live action realm, and Sony, their only real concern about SpiderVerse was that it'd be really different from those movies so as not to cause confusion with them. And, you know, we said, okay, fine. But, you know, little did they know that Phil Lord and Chris Miller, you know, who've done all these other genius works of reinvention, you know, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs and the 21 Jump Street and the Lego movie, you know, their notion was to do something really different for animation as a whole, not just from other Spider-Man movies. They wanted to sort of reinvent the American CG animated feature, because you know it had reached kind of a little bit of a creative standstill. That was the thought in all our minds. So the idea of presenting Spider-Man as something totally new became kind of our obsession. And so every creative decision we made was, how is this different? How is this new? How is this drawing from some aspect of the Spider-Man myth that we, you know, haven't seen before? Whether it's just, you know, the aesthetics being like the aesthetics of a comic book, or whether it's like we're taking more advantage of New York City since we can build our own New York City. And all those things went into this this attempt to do something that just hadn't been seen before. And so I think it was that, but it was also the realization that even if we make it as different as we can, the idea of Spider-Man as a character and as a myth is strong enough that it still translates. You still have the best, you realize what a powerful character that is, because everything you love about the Miles Morales version was there in the Peter Parker version. And it kind of renews the essential strength of the idea.
I love that. And you were talking about, you know, achieving something different, new for 3D. You know, there was so much happening on the screen at any given time, from environment to camera, like the two-tone comic, 3D textures, frames, lighting, not to mention the timing, like brilliant timing, and of the animation and the cuts. It had such rhythm to it. So the question, I guess, is like, how do you focus the audience's eye to where you want them to look with so much happening? Was it challenging? Was that like planned at the storyboard, or did you get a pass and then say, we need something here and here? Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because so much of filmmaking is just that, you know, telling the audience or leading them to where you want their attention to be, where the story is. And you know, a lot of it is second nature at this point for a lot of us, but yeah, there's decisions that you make all along the way, you know, whether it's starting in the writing, I guess, but in the storyboarding, in the animation, you know, with the flow of the action across the screen, in the editing, obviously, you know, when you're cutting and why you're cutting, and the rhythm of that cutting, and then down to the design and the lighting. You know, every pretty much, you know, we got into the mentality, you know, and I should just stop. I want everybody to know, I am like 1/5 of a team of really brilliant people, you know. So there's like, I can't, as I talk about the movie, I can only take credit for some of it, because our team, my co-directors, Bob Persichetti and Rodney Rothman, Phil and Chris, Lord and Bill are our producers, our production designer, Justin Thompson, just absolutely brilliant people that, you know, I was lucky to be in a room with. So, but every decision we made was literally, it was, how do we tell Miles's story with in as expressive a way as possible, to let you know exactly what the characters are feeling in any given moment. That was always our desire, and also there was the desire. Oh, could we make a movie that, like a comic book, you could take out any frame and you would have something that was beautifully designed and that was a clear picture of where the story was at that moment.
Nice. So speaking of Miles, the word choice is brought up a lot in this film. From Miles's father telling him he doesn't have a choice at the beginning, to his shoelace being untied, he's saying it's a choice, which ultimately leads to him falling off the building, which is great. And so many other, parts in the script and the story that talk about choice. So what, in your eyes, what does Miles learn about choice in this film?
Yeah, I think he learns that he really does have it. There's a constant, there's a real feeling in the movie of this whole idea of destiny, of things being taken out of your hands. You have to go to a school that you don't really want to go to, but that's, you scored well on a test. So sorry, I'm plugging myself in, but you scored well on some test and everybody thinks you should do it. So you're going to this school. There's so many things in Miles's life, I think, that he feels that, without even realizing it, he's being led to. And, even being bitten by the spider, he doesn't choose it. He doesn't want it. But suddenly he finds out that he is part of sort of this secret brotherhood of spider people, all across all these different universes. But what he realizes is, yes, everybody has a certain set of circumstances they end up in, but choice is how you decide what your actions are going to be to deal with those circumstances. That's the big thing for him. You're bitten by a spider and you're a Spider-Man, but okay, how are you going to be a Spider-Man? No matter what circumstance you're in your life, you have to live it the way that works for you, and that your unique combination of talents and qualities leads you to. So that was a huge one. People ask all the time, how do 3 directors work together? That's a question we always get, and usually it worked out okay. It's one of those things where this was a very big and complicated movie, and it really did require a lot of brains to get it to work right. And all of us came from slightly different fields. My background in animation and in live action was as a story artist. Bob Persichetti was always also a story artist, but he was also trained as an animator under Glenn Keane at Disney. So when it came to the technical points of animation, Bob was like the point go-to man. And then Rodney Rothman had been a comedy writer for a long time, and had worked with Phil and Chris, and was originally brought in to rewrite this gigantic, unwieldy script that Phil had written. And he was doing such great work on it that everybody, said, well, can this guy stick around? And the solution to getting him to stick around was for him to be a director. So we all brought different skills, but we all sort of worked in concert, because the original vision for the movie was so strong that we always had that as our North Star to sort of guide us. So that kept the fights from being too bloody. So I see a question here. What's the biggest challenge when directing a feature animated film? And it's a question from a short film director. I would say that the number one biggest challenge is probably the same as with a short. It really is keeping your eye on a vision and communicating it to the whole crew through every phase of the process. That becomes really, it's really important, because the timeline that you have when you're making an animated film, it's so long, and usually, at least in the films I've worked on, they tend to evolve as you're working on them. So ideas change and they come and go, or you find out that your original idea or the original way that you were going to tackle a certain sequence or scene, maybe it didn't work as well as it could have, and then you have to rethink it, or there's a new idea that comes in that might force other things to change. So there's a sort of flexibility built into the process, partially because it takes so long, but I think it's also the nature of animation that you can sort of you sort of see it as you're working on it. You know, it's not like a live action film where you shoot everything, then you kind of go back and edit and shape it from there. In animation, you're shaping it as you go, as many of you know. So the temptation is to follow up every single new idea. You know, what about this? What about that? What about this? What about that? And that's when you have to have some judgment as to, you know, which new ideas are going to take you towards your original vision and which ones take you away from that. And that, for me, that's one of the biggest challenges. And then remembering that, you know, different people working on the film may have different interpretations of what that vision is, and you have to make sure that as much as possible, people have their eyes on the same vision. And I see a question number 2, and it says, what is the most important thing to keep in mind when working on a project that involves so many people? And it literally is what I was kind of just saying. It literally is getting everybody to see the same ultimate vision, so that everybody's rowing the same way in the boat, you know. I remember on my first film, Rise of the Guardians, a few times I learned the lesson the hard way of assuming that people's understanding of the story and the vision for the story were the same as mine. So that you get into these situations where you're talking to somebody, you know, maybe it's about a design or a piece of animation, and you kind of go, yeah, you know what I mean. You know, you know that part, right? You get it. And the person goes, oh yeah, because, you know, in their mind, yes, they get a version of it. It might not be the same as the director's version, though. So it becomes very important to find a way to be very clear with everybody that you're working with about what you have in mind, and for them to understand it. I mean, it doesn't have to be a dictatorship. You know, it should, all the answers should come from the story. And that's one of the director's number 1 jobs, is being able to explain the story in such a way that people understand why certain decisions are being made. And that goes from, you know, from the costumes to the lighting to the, you know, to the editing to the sound. You should have an answer for any question that comes up about any aspect of the film, and the answer should come from the story. So the number 1 job of the director is understanding the story. Okay, question number 3. What advice would you give to someone trying to get into the animation industry, especially for a storyboard artist? Good question. I think that, well, the number 1 thing is don't give up. Keep working on whatever it is that you're working on, or what field you're working in. If you feel passionate about it and you really believe in it, and you really feel that's what you want to do, just don't give up, because somewhere along the way, an opportunity, you know, when you least expect it, most of the time, you know, someone you know, or someone you work with, or you never know, a door will open up. I know that sounds kind of, you know, new agey and airy fairy, but it happened to me over and over and over again. Now, that doesn't come without a lot of work and a lot of time. So a little patience comes into the mix here. But if you really are giving it a sincere effort, that can happen. The other thing I would say is, you know, especially these days when you can make films on your own much easier than you used to be able to, thanks to digital technology. You know, I mean, so I'd say work with your friends. You know, make films yourself. You can storyboard a whole film yourself. You know, or a short. You know, you can do it. You can edit it, and I promise you, doing that on your own will teach you so much more than a class or waiting for someone else to give you the chance. You know, do it on your own, and you will find that the things that you learn and the where you're driven to go and find answers from other places will teach you so much. And then at the end of the day, you have a piece of narrative that you can show someone, and you can actually show what you can do. And, you know, if you're honest with yourself, you also have a way to judge yourself in your own eyes, because you can look at the film and say, that's really good, or, well, that kind of sucks. How can I fix it? So those things, self-education, building networks of friends, of peers on your own level, because, you know, someone on your level, it may be you, is going to advance and go on, and you'll want to keep working with the people that you have relationships with and that you know and trust. So a lot of times, you know, it's pulling your friends with you as you go, or your friends pulling you with them. But it all comes down to being creative with other people and pooling your talents, and things happen that way also. So I would say those things. I mean, it mostly has to do with you wanting it and pushing for it, and being ready to take advantage of opportunities as they come. Oh, you know, one more piece of advice I would give: don't be shy about showing people your work. You know, that's one of the ultimately, all this stuff is designed so that it's going to be in front of an audience. So, you know, don't be precious about your work. Show it to other people whenever you get the chance. Get feedback. Learn what works. It's going to hurt when you get negative criticism, but it's going to teach you more than you could ever learn just sitting in your room on your own, staring at the same screen over and over again. And you know, one of those people that is impressed by your work is going to tell someone else, or one of them is going to know some connection you can make, or at the very least, you will gain the confidence of knowing that your work is at a good enough level that an actual audience will appreciate it, and that, you know, when you're going up for a job, that's a big deal. That kind of confidence translates. Okay, question 4. How much pull does the financial side have in your work? Ooh, good question also. Yeah, obviously a lot. It tends to manifest in different ways than people think, I think. It's not always, you know, decisions about specific scenes or dialogue, and it's not always, well, this needs to be more funny, or this needs to be more that. It's interesting. On SpiderVerse, we had the, I mean, really the only financial pressure we had was you can't have any more money. You know, that's the biggest financial pressure of all, I guess. But that financial pressure didn't translate to creative pressure. It didn't translate to, you have to cut this out because we don't like it, or you have to change the color of Spider-Man's costume because we don't like that color. It never really translated to that. And we were very lucky because Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who produced it, had a great relationship with the studio. They had earned that level of trust. So on SpiderVerse, the financial didn't really have an impact on the creative. So I think that obviously varies, but that's the main thing you don't want. It's one thing for people to tell you that, you know, well, you need, you know, $100 million to make this movie. You're only getting 80. That's one thing. You can work with that. The far more dangerous thing is, well, we're giving you $100 million, but guess what? You can't make this movie the way you want to. That's the more dangerous kind of pressure. And luckily, we did not have to deal with it on SpiderVerse. Question 5. Could you talk more about the topic of representation? I'm asking from a point of view of a female director. You've managed to create a universal story that is brilliant and postmodernistic. Thank you very much. When do you think we'll get a Spider-Man that is not just a girl Spider-Man, where the girl is the only description of the character? P.S. I love your work, and oh, you're very welcome. I think, I mean, what we tried hard to do, I think, in SpiderVerse was do that with Miles. That, you know, okay, he's got spider powers, but he's not exactly the same as Peter Parker. You know, Peter Parker was like a little science genius, and he was picked on at school, and he was didn't have parents, and there were a lot of things about Peter Parker that were very different than Miles Morales, and we wanted that. We wanted to make him as different and as authentic in his own right, so that audiences would embrace him as someone real and as someone new and different, you know, as someone specific. And I think, yeah, with when there is a movie about, you know, a female spider person, and I'm 100% positive there will be, I think it'll be the exact same thing there. The thing that makes these characters interesting is not necessarily that they have these spider powers or any superpowers. It's how does that affect the person that they are? And without knowing the person that they are, and without getting a sense of, you know, how that person reacts, or what their problems, or what they're struggling with, you know. The same as in any movie. You know, what makes any character interesting? It's how they deal with the situations they're put into based on who they are. So yeah, I think that's definitely the aim. And you know, the personality of the character is what's going to determine how they act as a superhero. That's the ultimate thing that you want. You know, that's a good story is all about how does a person deal with changing circumstances, and do they grow, or do they fail? What's the deal based on who they are? So hopefully any of those Spider movies would do the exact same thing.